I had spent a staggering $200,000 on Kenny, who hadn't even bothered to attend my mother's funeral, and suddenly he had unexpectedly flown abroad. The burning question lingered. What on earth did he do with such a substantial sum? Reflecting on it, I recalled the grand piano we once had at home, a beautiful instrument that held sentimental value. I had sold it, assuming it would fetch a decent amount. Little did I expect it to reach the exorbitant figure of $200,000. It turned out Kenny had mistakenly believed that the grand piano belonged to him. My condolences to his misconception. While I rightfully held the inheritance rights to the family estate, the piano was originally purchased by our grandfather for my brother. He, a piano teacher, had left it at our family home due to its size, and his strong sense of ownership would undoubtedly be offended by its unauthorized sale. When I informed Kenny about the mistake and the need to compensate my brother, he promptly hung up. My name is Rachel Schneider, a 45-year-old office worker from a distinguished lineage dating back to colonial times. Despite my desire for independence, family responsibilities forced me into a quest for a spouse to continue our family name. Kenny, 10 years my junior, unexpectedly became that person at a singles mixer. His shy and reserved demeanor promised a balance to my assertive family dynamics. As our relationship developed, I had to disclose the challenging situation with my bedridden mother, requiring care from me and my sister-in-law, Catherine. Despite the circumstances, Kenny gladly accepted and even proposed, expressing his willingness to assist with caregiving. His kindness initially touched me deeply, especially considering Kenny's role as a daycare teacher. However, a few months into our marriage, he expressed a sudden desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he wore a remorseful look and explained, "Sorry, Rachel, the parents at my daycare are just too demanding, and there's a lot of complaining. I just can't handle it anymore." Despite wanting to encourage him, his timid demeanor and his current role in helping with my mother's care left me speechless. Complicating matters, I was 3 months pregnant, and I was determined to get along well with Kenny for the sake of our unborn child. I adopted a lenient attitude, but my regret quickly set in. As I exited the shower one day and tried to enter the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. Shocked by the content of his call, I learned that he had managed to deceive me. He had been unemployed for 2 years, and he had misled me about quitting his job. It was evident from his conversation that he saw marrying into my wealthy family as hitting the jackpot due to our financial status. Feeling deceived and betrayed, I wanted to confront him immediately, but the thought of the baby held me back. I had lost confidence in our future. Today, my sister-in-law, Catherine, would be taking care of my mom until 5:00 p.m., after which I would take over. As I contemplated whether to confide in someone about Kenny, Catherine noticed my troubled expression and approached me. "Rachel, you look down. If something's troubling you, please share it with me," she offered with concern. Catherine, being the kind person she is, had taken care of her own mother for years, and now she was genuinely good at looking after mine. Feeling the need to confide in someone, I opened up to her about Kenny. She listened attentively, reassuring me, "It's good you talked. Keeping this to yourself could have been harmful to your unborn child." Expressing her understanding, Catherine continued, "No worries. Talking doesn't necessarily solve everything, but it surely lightens the load." Despite the difficult situation, she appeared genuinely concerned, almost as if it was her own problem. Unexpectedly, the doorbell rang, and Kenny entered without waiting for a response. Both Catherine and I were taken aback, but Kenny acted as if nothing was amiss, offering to help with my mom's care. He put on the act of a gentleman, saying, "Rachel, I'm going to help with your mom's care from today. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you straining yourself." Feigning compliance, I agreed, and Kenny continued, "Okay, let me show you how to care for her." However, Catherine intervened, stating firmly, "No, I'll learn from Catherine. You just rest at home." Catherine explained that my brother would be coming home early, rendering her help unnecessary. Upon hearing this, Catherine looked at me, shaking her head, suggesting that she might confront Kenny and get the full story out of him once she was gone. Deciding to leave it to her, I pretended to depart but remained nearby, unable to shake off my worry. As Catherine attempted to engage Kenny in conversation, he took the initiative, asking, "I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house?" He used the same tone he had on the phone. Catherine explained the situation, but Kenny's response was shocking. He began to say horrible things to Catherine, accusing her of ulterior motives and suggesting that she might be upset for not getting a piece of the family's wealth. Angered by Kenny's harsh words, I struggled to contain my emotions and wanted to leave the room. As I was on the verge of intervening, Catherine, noticing me, signaled with her eyes not to. Reluctantly, I stayed quiet and observed the unfolding scene. Kenny, clearly agitated, accused Catherine of hitting a nerve and demanded that she leave immediately, emphasizing that the family's wealth belonged solely to him and his wife. Catherine, sensing the futility of further discussion, decided to exit the situation. I discreetly stepped outside, pondering how I could later apologize to her for the distress Kenny had caused. Kenny took charge of Mom's care, insisting that I should not be involved. He briefly explained the basics of caregiving, but his negligent approach had tragic consequences, and our mother passed away under his care. The funeral took place at a church where generations of our family had been buried. However, from the day of Mom's passing, Kenny mysteriously disappeared. Despite my attempts to locate him, funeral preparations and other arrangements kept me occupied. Relatives and neighbors were puzzled by Kenny's absence. Catherine, visibly distraught, cried in front of the altar, apologizing for entrusting Kenny with the caregiving duties. I approached her, attempting to console her and shifting the blame away from her. Catherine, burdened with guilt, insisted that it wasn't my fault, but she expressed frustration at Kenny's disappearance just as Mom passed away. We both questioned Kenny's behavior, noting that he often left the house even when he was supposed to be caring for Mom. Neighbors mentioned frequent absences, making it appear as though he wasn't caregiving at all. Additionally, there were reports of a large truck visiting the house, but with the funeral underway, I refrained from bringing up these details. Days passed after the funeral, and Kenny still hadn't returned. Then, I received a call from him on my phone. His carefree voice came through, casually revealing that he was at a luxury hotel in Europe, the kind he had seen on a travel show. Enraged, I confronted him about skipping Mom's funeral, only to receive an unexpected revelation. He had sold the family's grand piano for $200,000 and was using that money to travel around Europe. The grand piano, which my mother had referred to as a family heirloom, indeed held a substantial value of around $200,000. Unbelievably, Kenny had sold it and indulged in luxurious hotels, swiftly depleting all the money. This revelation stunned me. I never anticipated such a selfish act from him, especially when he was supposed to be taking care of my mother. Despite the tight security at our family home, the truck that had visited must have transported the piano. Expressing my concerns, I confronted Kenny about his selfish actions. His nonchalant response, stating that he would become a stay-at-home dad due to my job, left me flabbergasted. It seemed he was intent on leeching off me, and the realization that he mistakenly believed the grand piano belonged to me added another layer to the situation. In response to his puzzled reaction, I explained the piano's history, clarifying that it belonged to my brother, who had received it from our grandfather. Kenny showed little remorse, asking if an apology to my brother would suffice. However, my brother, a piano teacher with a strong personality and a disdain for dishonesty, would not settle for mere compensation. The grand piano held immense sentimental value for him, and the thought of it being sold without permission was sure to trigger a severe reaction. Upon sharing this information, the phone abruptly hung up, leaving Kenny likely regretful and contemplating the consequences. I decided to call my brother and inform him of the situation, knowing he would be livid. The next day, I orchestrated a gathering with the whole family present, including my brother and his wife, Catherine. As Kenny entered through the front door, his eyes widened in surprise, seeing everyone in the living room. Confused, he questioned the gathering, to which my brother, wearing a menacing look, responded, "Kenny, I heard everything from Rachel." "What were you thinking, selling someone else's property, especially something that valuable, without consulting the family?" Nervous and visibly uncomfortable, Kenny attempted to justify himself. I stuttered, trying to explain. I was just trying to help with the chores around the house out of boredom. When I saw the old, large grand piano, I thought no one was using it anymore. My feeble attempt at justification continued. "So, you decided to sell it?" my brother asked sternly. Kenny admitted, "Yes, it seemed like a waste just to leave it there." My brother's expression remained stern as he interrogated further. "Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale?" It was evident that my brother, playing the role of an interrogator, was trying to make Kenny confess in front of everyone. Kenny, perhaps feeling desperate, struggled to respond immediately, appearing lost in thought. The sales money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet," he stammered in a flustered manner. My brother's anger finally erupted, accusing Kenny of lying. He questioned, "Just how rotten are you? For starters, what's with those souvenirs from Europe in that huge suitcase?" Kenny, seemingly struck by the accusation, closed his eyes and shrunk back, admitting, "I'm sorry. I used up all the money." The revelation left everyone in shock. Relatives began murmuring, realizing the value of the grand piano and expressing disbelief that Kenny could spend $200,000 on just one overseas trip. My brother, looking down at Kenny, lifted his chin with his hand, making eye contact, and delivered a stern ultimatum. "I think you already know from Rachel, but that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you're going to pay back every single penny. If you can't, I'm going to sue you for theft. Are you okay with that?" My brother confronted Kenny with intense determination, his demeanor resembling that of a mob boss, turning a seemingly typical family dispute into a potential legal matter. My brother's intimidating demeanor seemed to have the desired effect on Kenny, who, clueless about the law, lost his voice and began sweating profusely. In a frightened voice, he looked at me and pleaded, "Rachel, please help me." I was dumbfounded by his plea, as I had nothing to do with the situation. It was entirely his doing. When I dismissed his plea, Kenny resorted to saying something ridiculous, claiming that he had taken care of my mom during my pregnancy, and the overseas trip was a reward for himself. In a bizarre attempt to justify his actions, he proposed that we both decided to sell the piano, arguing that since we're siblings, it wouldn't be considered theft. I couldn't close my open mouth. His absurdity left me speechless. Thankfully, Catherine came to my rescue, asserting, "Enough is enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to come for caregiving? You even told me you thought I was just after the inheritance and tried to drive me away." She exposed Kenny's previous attempts to undermine our connection to the family, revealing that he had been plotting to sell the piano secretly without letting us get close to the family home. My brother's anger peaked again as he addressed Kenny, emphasizing that Catherine had taken care of Mom out of kindness, not for financial gain. He demanded an immediate apology from Kenny to Catherine. Grasping Kenny by the collar, my brother forced him to kneel in front of Catherine, who was visibly hurt by Kenny's insulting behavior. Through tears, Kenny apologized, but the relatives present looked at him with cold eyes. One relative shouted at Kenny to pay back the money from the piano sale as soon as possible to avoid tarnishing the Schneider family name. Misunderstanding the gravity of the situation, Kenny made another odd remark, suggesting that they could save money together as a couple and repay it little by little. Even my uncle was left speechless at Kenny's nonsensical interpretation. Feeling that words wouldn't resolve the issue, I decided to fetch something from my room, the business card of a divorce lawyer. I handed it to Kenny and told him to call the number, declaring that I wanted our relationship to be over, and from now on, we would communicate through lawyers. Kenny's face turned pale at the prospect of the relationship ending, and he questioned why I would do this when we were about to have a baby. At that moment, I revealed what Kenny had been discussing with his friend on the phone, exposing his true intentions and confirming that I had known all along that he approached me for my inheritance. Surrounded by a cold stare from everyone, Kenny, realizing he had no way out, adopted a defiant attitude. He expressed disappointment, revealing that he had hoped to get close to the $9 million inheritance I had received from my mother after we got married. This sudden change in Kenny, who had always appeared gentle, shocked everyone present. I couldn't help but feel hurt, wondering if I should have been more suspicious of the man I'd met at a dating event who was 10 years younger. From that moment on, Kenny became a stranger to me and my brother. As a natural consequence, he had to repay the money from selling the grand piano. Kenny broke down, stating that he couldn't do that, but with all the relatives present willing to testify against him, there was no escaping the consequences. However, I assured him that I wouldn't ask for child support. In return, I made it clear that he would have no involvement with our child, firmly stating that this was my child alone, and he couldn't even claim to be its father. Following our divorce, Kenny's life took a turn for the worse as he struggled with poverty, taking odd jobs to make ends meet. He eventually faced a new challenge when the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it for a refund. The piano, which Kenny had claimed was in pristine condition, had a large engraving on the back made by my brother, asserting ownership. Kenny hadn't checked the back, likely selling it through a shady dealer lured in by tempting offers. Kenny had to return $200,000 to the buyer, and considering his debt to my brother, the financial burden became substantial. Attempts to file for bankruptcy were thwarted by legal action from my brother and me. Now burdened with even more debt, Kenny worked tirelessly in manual labor jobs. Fortunately, the heirloom grand piano was safely returned to my brother, who took extra precautions to protect it. He installed a strong lock on the room where the piano was kept and even set up a security camera, determined to safeguard the instrument. My brother, unchanged from his childhood days, expressed his desire to start a piano school at our family home. As discussions about sharing our mother's inheritance took place, my brother agreed with my decision, fostering a positive relationship with his family. Blessed with the arrival of a long-awaited baby girl, I became a single mom. Catherine, who had supported me since I was taking care of my mom, continued to be a pillar of strength. My brother stepped in as a father figure for my daughter, excited about the role. My nieces, influenced by their father's love for the piano, became kindergarten teachers and adored my daughter. Grateful for the warm support from my family, I intended to live strong with my daughter, acknowledging the blessings around me and looking forward to a bright future.